Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's public webinar from WWF. We are here to launch our new report called Beyond Net Zero. This is our guide for businesses to help drive climate action. We know there are many businesses out there who are looking for practical solutions to overcoming their emissions problems. And in today's webinar, we are very happy to be sharing our own insights, but also sharing the perspectives of some of our corporate partners. In today's session, it'll just be under an hour long. We will take you through some context setting on climate change and give you a little bit of an update. I will then take you through the Beyond Net Zero report and how it can help your company. And then we'll hear from our guest speakers, Henrik Sundberg, from the Climate Impact Lead from H&M Group, and Sriram Rajagopal, Head of Climate and Air Quality at Inter IKEA Group. And then we will have some time for questions and answers at the end. We do have a questions and answers box located at the bottom of your Zoom window, so please feel free to add any questions you have for our WWF or guest speakers. We'll try to answer them on the call, and if we don't have time, we can respond directly after today's session. But first, let's kick off with a video.
We are at a defining moment when it comes to addressing climate change. The world scientists are saying it's now or never. The past several years have witnessed record heat, devastating floods, and intensifying wildfires. Global temperatures have temporarily breached the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. Scientists are clear. We need meaningful action, and we need it now. To avoid the worst impacts of climate change, we need a rapid, system-wide transformation, changing how we power our economies, how we produce and consume, and how we repair our broken relationship with nature. Businesses play a critical role in this. Pressure is rising from investors, regulators, consumers, and communities, and with it, expectations are shifting. Stakeholders no longer want climate promises. They're demanding credible, science-aligned action with meaningful impact. And there are signs of progress. Over 11,000 companies have set climate targets. Some are beginning to decouple emissions from growth, but the pace is still far too slow, and ambition must now meet the scale of the crisis. The good news? We have the solutions. Every major sector has the tools it needs to cut emissions in half by 2030. What is needed now is leadership. That's why WWF developed Beyond Net Zero guidance. This guide helps companies take ambitious, science-aligned climate action. It integrates measurable targets, clear metrics, and best practices to accelerate progress, taking into account the latest standards and evolving regulatory changes. Beyond Net Zero means halving emissions by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050 at the latest. It can be achieved through financing and supporting additional climate and nature solutions within and beyond your company's value chain, engaging responsibly and actively in climate policy, collaborating with other companies and organizations around shared solutions, and enabling and inspiring customers. This is a benchmark for corporate climate action, true leadership in a climate emergency. WWF has co-developed this guidance with forward-looking companies who understand the science. Those companies who understand the benefits of cutting emissions and the risks of delay. A true climate leader contributes to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and helps shape a future where nature and people can thrive. With this guidance, WWF is showing businesses what is expected of them. We invite your business to step up, commit to net zero, and go beyond.
Now, very proud of that, not going to lie. Okay, we'll look into the next bit, which is context setting. And it's always hard to do this next part because we want to show you the seriousness of the situation, but also want you to be engaged with it and not frightened or check out. So in these next few slides, I will go through a short summary of the issues we face, and then we'll go through the hopeful part as well. I'm keen to remind you of that because it's something you don't hear enough of. There are so many things to be hopeful for, and there's so much we can still do. So this is a great part. But if we want to fully address the problem, we need to understand it. And I'll start us off with this. This graph shows the increase in global surface temperature. This is one of many graphs relating to our world that shows a dramatic increase. We call it the Great Acceleration, and it is linked to the burning of fossil fuels and carbon emissions. So, if like me, you were born in the 1980s, every successive year of your life has been warmer than the one before. According to the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environment Programme, each successive decade since the 1980s has been warmer than the preceding one, with 2010 to 2019 being the warmest decade on record. The global average near surface temperature for each year between 2024 and 2028 is predicted to be between 1.1 degrees Celsius and 1.9 degrees Celsius higher than the 1850s baseline. You may be familiar with our 1.5 degree boundary that gets discussed often. It is one thing to cross that boundary every now and again for an extreme year. But if we continue on this trend, it becomes an average temperature. And with it comes a huge amount of problems for our natural world. That is a stark warning, and we are getting ever closer to the goals that in the Paris Agreement set on climate change, which refer to long-term temperature increase over decades, not in a matter of years like we're seeing. To avert the worst effects of climate change, global warming needs to be limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius with limited overshoot. This will only be possible if we dramatically reduce greenhouse gases and also increase carbon dioxide removals in line with achieving net zero CO2 by 2050. But that's a scientific perspective, and this is a complicated graph that many people won't engage with. What does it look like on a human level? We often get trapped looking at numbers, so I wanted to show you. This is what it looks like to our own eyes. This is the problem we're trying to overcome. I said it in our video, and I'll say it again. We are at a defining moment in the global response to climate change. The risks posed by a warming planet are escalating, driven by the increasing frequency and severity of climate-related disruptions. This creates unprecedented challenges for businesses, economies, and societies alike. We're seeing extreme weather events double in frequency over just decades. Coral reefs, our vital ecosystems, have been devastated with 80% affected since 2023. As wildfires rage across cities and countries, many regions are becoming uninsurable. According to The Economist, we're on track to lose up to $25 trillion in value of housing markets across the globe by 2050 if we stay on this path. They are not just environmental impacts anymore, they're economic ones. For businesses, this means disrupted supply chains, unstable markets, inflationary pressure, health risks, and reputational fallout. Climate change is now a full spectrum business risk. And that's why striving for 1.5 degrees C and net zero targets is critical. Because as we've been seeing, climate crisis is no longer a distant threat. It's here, now, and it's escalating. Of course, it doesn't just impact businesses and the economy, but we need to talk about that part. Climate change has broader spillovers that are transnational, which can undermine food and water security, trade and energy supplies, jobs and livelihoods, equity and well-being, and national, social, and economic development. Here, we have some pretty staggering facts that show the intersection. Addressing these challenges isn't just about sustainability, it's about safeguarding economies, food systems, our public health, and our energy security. And while this all may seem like very intense information to throw at you all, I believe it's a good thing to show to start us. It helps us understand. We understand climate change. We know the problems we face. We know the cause and we know the impacts. But for some reason, we're still seeing a lot of confusion in this space and a lot of movement is being stifled where we need it most. And that's because of how climate change is being discussed in the public forum. If you've been watching the news, first of all, my condolences, but also you will be no doubt aware that this is a narrative issue around climate change. Constant pushbacks about the cost of action or how difficult it will be, or even a resurgence in climate denial have all started to become more common. This is a counter narrative that is designed to make you feel like sustainability is a hopeless cause. Headlines thrive on despair. It's easy to internalize that fear and start to believe that nothing we can do can make a difference. But feeling empowered and feeling hopeful are two key ingredients we need to take action on climate change. And as we all know, we can often feel massively overwhelmed by the state of the world and the climate. And it's no secret why this is happening. Media barons who have investments in fossil fuel industry push a narrative that helps their agenda. And unfortunately, it can be very, very effective. So while WWF doesn't own its own news channel, we can certainly use our platform to help fight this narrative and show the truth of the situation. And this is where we get to the fun part, where I get to flip the narrative. So the extreme weather events are just one side of the story we're seeing. There's a lot of good happening around the world and real progress taking place. There are multiple areas in which we are seeing incredible changes. Solar power is now the cheapest electricity in history. According to the International Energy Agency, utility-scale solar now beats fossil fuels on cost in most regions. Wind energy is booming. Onshore and offshore wind are now mainstream and scaling rapidly with record installations every year. Battery storage costs have dropped by nearly 90% in the last decade. This makes renewable energy far more reliable and flexible. Over 90% of global GDP is now covered by net zero targets. Countries, cities, and companies are all aligning around climate action. We've seen a growth in green cities. Urban areas are adopting new green buildings, electrified transport, and circular waste systems, making it cleaner living spaces for millions. EVs are surging. Electric vehicle sales have doubled in 2021 and continue to break records, reducing oil demand and air pollution. Regenerative agriculture is spreading. Farmers are restoring their soils and improving the biodiversity and capturing carbon. Circular economy models are saving money and resources. Businesses are finding profit in reuse and recycling and moving to waste to value innovations. And of course, heavy industry is decarbonizing. We've seen steel makers, cement producers, and chemical companies all piloting green hydrogen and carbon-free processes. Now, that's just 9 bullet points, but that should be enough already to show you that there's incredible movement in space and give you a great piece of hope in an age of misinformation and online nonsense. It's an incredible acceleration. This is the kind of scale and speed that the fossil fuel tells us is impossible. The fossil fuel industry has consistently campaigned against this, saying none of these things can happen, and we've consistently shown them they can. The numbers don't lie. So while the risks are real, and we won't sugarcoat them, so is the opportunity. The transition to net zero isn't a burden, it's a business strategy. Companies that move are now future-proofing. They're resilient, they're relevant, and they're winning both trust and capital, and also taking on new talent. And even if we look at the economic perspective, we see a more positive story than you might expect. Benefits of accelerating climate transition grossly outweighs the cost of transitioning. According to a report by Deloitte, over the next 50 years, climate inaction would cost the global economy $178 trillion. And on the flip side of that, over the same period, climate action would grow the economy by $43 trillion. So there's a range there of $226 trillion, which is an eye-watering amount to even comprehend, but it's all possible if we engage in this topic correctly. For those interested in GDP, embarking on a transition to net zero emissions by 2050 has the potential to raise global GDP by 7% in comparison to current policies and business as usual. There's also a very important side that we have to talk about, and that's lowering emissions greatly reduces the physical impacts of climate change. It lowers the paralyzing economic costs that come with it. Transitioning to a net zero economy will indeed require substantial investment in green electricity and energy storage. That's true. But when the transition negatively impacts demand from higher carbon prices and energy costs, these can be partially offset by recycling carbon revenues into government investment and lower employment taxes. There are many opportunities to create positive feedback loops with the money that already exists in the economy. It's just about directing it into the right places. And our economic argument doesn't stop there. What you choose not to do is equally and sometimes more important than what you choose to do. In this case, the cost of not investing in decarbonization will sabotage your books, whether you like it or not. Studies show that failures to decarbonize could risk up to 20% in economic profit for companies by 2030. There is no escaping the costs associated with climate change, but it's up to you to decide if you'd like to spend less time increasing your resilience and thriving, or spend more trying and struggling to stay afloat. The cost of damages incurred from climate change could cost up to 6 times as much as those mitigating it. So with that being said, is there really that much to decide on? Well, that's a lot of context to throw at you. So thank you so much for bearing with me. I went through all that, but feel it's important to show you the problem and highlight the miscommunications around it. I'd like to give you some now hope and positivity of what we can do next. And more importantly, I would like to show you our new report, which aims to give you the roadmap you need to take the next steps in your sustainability journey. This is our Beyond Net Zero guide, and I'm very happy to be sharing it with you. First launched back in April 2022, Beyond Net Zero has been our guiding light for businesses in WWF and how we work together with them. This is collaboration between experts at WWF and the members of our Climate Business Network to show what ambitious, credible corporate climate leadership looks like. This is a topic that's increasingly more important, so we thought it was time for a refresh. A lot has happened since first launch back in 2022. The climate has changed, regulations have changed, economies have changed, and most importantly, standards have changed. We are still reaching for the stars, but this time with a refreshed alignment to what's evolving developments have happened in the net zero ecosystem. If you are new to Beyond Net Zero, let me describe it as this. It is a practical guide that brings all the asks of business into one place and simplifies them. We have cleared up as much confusing language as possible. We have made sure it's practical guidance and not just a lot of technical speak. And we have organized it into our 7 leadership actions. So if you are struggling to understand where all the different requests you get and the broader scheme of things all fit together, now you can know. It will be available in 7 languages. We are an international organization working across the globe, so it's important that we are speaking to businesses all throughout the planet and through those key supply chains that we're working to decarbonize. Those languages will be Mandarin, Japanese, Swedish, French, Turkish, and Spanish. Now, as for our 7 steps, this is a linear progression. So you shouldn't be working on things that are in steps 5 or 6 without first completing the first steps. The 7 steps are divided into a very simple kind of way to define things. So it's account and disclose your carbon emissions consistently and transparently according to the best practices. Number 2 is set climate targets in line with the 1.5-degree pathway with Science Based Targets Initiative. Number 3 is to reduce your emissions in line with that pathway. This is such a huge part, and we know a lot of businesses like to move past this one. So we've got a lot of potential changes inside this report that can maybe help you. It's not a complete list, but it should definitely get you started and show you the way. The 4th pillar is finance and support climate and nature solutions across your value chain. 5th, we have engage responsibly and actively in climate policy in your local areas. And I highlight the point responsibly. Collaborate with your partners and your peers to overcome critical barriers, of course, is key. And then enable and inspire your customers by being open about your work, showing them what you're working on. We know there are already so many guides and reports out there already. It can be really overwhelming to know where to start. We made sure to build on the incredible work already being done in this space. We don't want to add to the noise. Instead, we want to cut through it and bring you more important bits into clarity. So that is why I want to really stress that this is a synthesis report. We've brought together many reports from the WWF, the UN, the SBTi, Exponential Roadmap, CDP, and more. These actions can be your starting point. And if you still have questions, if we haven't gone into it as detailed as you'd like, well, we can dig out the other reports as well and go from there. And if we zoom into each of these actions, they each get 2 pages. This is where we give you the context, give you the actions you need, and a list of best practices to help you achieve it, and then the suggested metrics for tracking progress. That's it. We do that 7 times, and for each one, taking you a step closer to being net zero. Of this, we've also tried to make it a bit more friendly for use. One of the key objectives for Beyond Net Zero project was to make it as practical as possible. We didn't want it to be another academic guide on climate. It was intended to be an easy-to-use guide for companies to follow. As part of that objective, we have created a suite of additional resources and video case studies to showcase what we can do and basically highlight good practice from our partners. Working with our corporate partners in WWF's Climate Business Network, most notably IKEA and H&M, using their institutional knowledge and their hands-on experience of emission reduction and corporate sustainability to help develop guidance that can clear up confusion and help other businesses. These case studies are designed to inspire businesses by showing you that sustainability goals are not only realistic, but also beneficial for long-term success. Each of these case studies is under 15 minutes. It offers practical guidance and features our key partners, including some you'll hear from shortly. They are available on YouTube and they're free to use at any time. Now, you've heard me talk enough about how amazing Beyond Net Zero is, and it's time to hear some other voices tell you about it themselves. So today we have Henrik Sundberg, the climate impact lead from H&M, and Sriram Rajagopal, head of climate and air quality at Inter IKEA Group. They're going to take some time now to talk us through some work. I'm very excited to introduce you to them. They've worked very closely with us throughout the whole development of this project all the way to launch. So thank you, gentlemen. And first, I'll hand over to Henrik.
Thank you so much, Sean. I hope you can see and hear me. Excellent. Always a good first step. So great to be here. And as Sean mentioned, I'm the climate impact lead at H&M Group. So responsible for our climate action, basically across all the different brands we have and the functions. So a little bit of end-to-end with a focus on climate perspective. And I thought I would start, if you move us along, I thought I would start with what we call our climate action framework. So basically the H&M Group's interpretation and version of the pillars we have here. And I did my best to map in the pillars here for your kind of convenience to see how it comes together. And as Sean's mentioned, we have been kind of part of the development and the discussion behind this as well. So of course it's not a coincidence that we see some similarities. But I thought I would walk you through this quickly, starting from the bottom up. and focusing here on risk and what's now famously called the double materiality assessment, which is kind of part of every corporate now, understanding why we should focus, why we should look at this and what we should focus on. So understanding basically what are the risks that we see, both when it comes to financial risk, but also people and planet effects, and then work with prioritizing how we address these. And this comes, of course, climate change, of course, comes out as one of the key risks and also opportunities to drive here. And if we move up one level here, we are focusing on what's called calculate and disclose here in this. So very close to the account and disclose of the 7 pillars. And this is then focusing on specifically then identifying the emissions we have. And I think this is an underrated part of this model, that understanding what exact data is behind the emission calculations and what is driving the emissions in detail is really a key to then moving on in this staircase to be able to reduce. So in some cases, and also to be able to prioritize with that. So where we have smaller emission sources, using a simpler model will suffice, while where we focus on larger emission sources, having very granular data, often from suppliers and suppliers and their suppliers and so on, to be able to track and actually reduce them when we come to the next layer here. So for a single company, I guess this set action is more of a one-off, and then we kind of focus on delivering on that commitment. So setting a target and ours, I will come to that shortly, but focusing on this 1.5-degree pathway, and then identifying how to address these impacts and reduce emissions. And here I think focusing on the collaborative side of things, we have sit down with our most of our suppliers that cover most of the emissions that we have, and create a common view of the issue and how we can address the impacts from each supplier site, basically. So setting a site level roadmap with the suppliers, what energy sources are available, how can they access electricity, how can they expand renewables, can they secure long-term access to renewables, for example, and sitting together with them, we identify the problems that we can solve between us, but we can also see what do we need to look beyond the kind of factory gates for. What do we need to look at when we come to the 5th pillar here, advocating for the systemic change? Where do we need to look to get more brands and peers along with us on the journey? Where do we need to look at the policy side of things and advocate for public policy that also supports these goals, both in kind of general terms with having ambitious country direction, but also very specific actions that, for example, enable the build out of renewable electricity or strengthening electricity grids. And for those of you who are attentive, you might notice I skipped the 4th step here, but contributing to how we address impact is also a really key area. So this is both focusing on our long-term net zero targets, so making sure that we also have a plan and commitments, and there are volumes available to actually permanently store carbon dioxide to reach our net zero by 2040. So that is kind of a not an existing market today. So being part of building and supporting that market to have it available when we need these permanent removals available is also a key action here. And of course, financing our own reduction activities, but also protecting existing carbon sinks and avoiding emissions and biodiversity loss, for example, from degradation of land are some key areas here as well. So again, as you can see, there's a tight connection between the way that the pillars are set up and our climate action framework. Even though we are kind of less colorful here, I guess. Maybe that's something we need to work on for the next round. So if you move us on, Sean, please. So I thought I would also mention your targets and mention our targets. And as you said, Sean, I think that anchoring them in the 1.5 degrees and using the science-based targets as a foundation for how to make these anchored outside of the company, I think is such a crucial part of this as well, to make this a long-lasting and long-term target setting. So we have Scope 1 and 2 and Scope 3 targets, all to reduce by 56% by 2030, so slightly more than half by 2030, and then a net zero target by 2040. And this net zero target then is at least 90% reduction in absolute terms. And then we have this balancing out of the residual emissions. So any of those 90%, anything that remains after those 90% will need to be balanced out with permanent carbon dioxide removals. And again, emphasizing then the need to kind of start acting on that already now, to be able to have those technologies and those models in place already. And if we move on, I think we can also, I also like to mention that where we are in the progress towards this. So as a fashion company, most of our emissions occur in the production of the products we sell. About 2/3 of emissions are from the combination of raw materials and the industrial processes behind going from a fiber through the yarn to a yarn, dyeing, spinning, weaving, and making this into a fabric that you can then cut and sew into a finished garment. That covers about 2/3 of the emissions for us, and of course is one of the biggest kind of focus areas we have. And we are quite proud to be on track here with our targets. We try to visualize like the linear journey here between the base year and 2030, and where we see ourselves on that journey now. And even though we can see a kind of linear line here, it's definitely not a linear journey. But I think we're quite excited to see how well we are doing on this, actually. And I think a lot of the reductions in initial years are connected to material substitutions, efficiency measures that are fairly quickly implemented, where we can also measure, or we can see the effects of this in the carbon accounting fairly quickly. Meanwhile, the traceability initiatives that we also started at that point, focusing on efficiencies in production processes, these kind of commitments we have together with suppliers and setting their plans and their journeys, that is starting to kind of show up now in the actual accounting and measurable. So having these conversations, making the commitments, putting the finance in place, that doesn't pay off year one. It takes some time for that to really show up. And we're very happy to start seeing really clearly the effect of that also in this bigger picture. And of course, the use of renewable electricity and energy in general is a very, very important part of this as well, which we can also see an increase in. So if you take us further to my final slide here, I can also see here that there's a little bit of a little bit messy slide here. I think it's some technical issue here, I guess, with it. But as I mentioned, a lot of the emissions connected to a business like ours is the energy use and the energy used in these kind of industrial production processes. So one important step for us was to further dig into the data here and be able to account and disclose all of the details of the energy use. So I don't want to scare you with all these tables, but there are many more if you go into our energy report, which is kind of a new product from that was launched together with the 2024 annual report. And I'm very happy to be able to kind of break down, as you see, in quite a lot of details, what types of energy are used across different countries. Because you can really see the challenges there. These examples is on the totals, but you can, for example, see a breakdown of which fuels are used in China, for example, and you can see what are the challenges you see there, or what's the main how much of the electricity is renewable in Bangladesh. We can see that that's a lower number than it would be in general. Because of the challenge with availability there. So I think sharing this data and putting that information out there has been a really important step for us. So I would encourage you, if you want some light reading here in the afternoon. That can be something for you to browse and have a look at. And also super happy to take any kind of input on this, like what else you will be interested in seeing, and if there's something kind of missing in that, because we're always trying to improve and capture other needs to increase the transparency and what we share, and you know, be able to inspire using that. Great. So that was kind of what I wanted to show you, a little bit on the strategic side, then the targets and our progress, and a little kind of teaser on this nice reading here on the energy side of things. But Sean, if there are any questions now, or if we take them at the end, maybe.
Exactly that. We have a couple of questions coming in already, so we'll keep those for our Q&A section, and I'll take this time to remind everyone to please drop some more questions if you have them. Give these guys a hard time. They're really good, so let's make sure that we're working with them. Next up, thank you first of all, Henrik. That was really excellent, really practical, and we love to see that. So next up, I'm going to hand it over to Sriram. Sriram, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sean. I hope you can hear me.
We can.
And thank you, Henrik, for the fantastic presentation. It's always such a pleasure to learn from and be inspired by all the work that H&M is doing, and the energy report that you alluded to. I just wanted to mention that, you know, we are also referencing all the nuggets of wisdom that you're and the data that you're putting out, and also what we can learn from that report. So just wanted to thank you for that. And we're always overjoyed to draw inspiration from you. But it's an absolute pleasure also to be given an opportunity to be here in your midst and share a bit of the journey that we are taking across the IKEA value chain. The partnership with WWF has hugely helped us in shaping our strategy, so much so that we have sort of framed our climate strategy, net zero and beyond. So not a big departure from beyond net zero. And this was a strategy that we have been in discussion with WWF since the last guide was published by WWF, as Sean mentioned, in 2022. And this new strategy was signed off by our management team in May last year. So we have 3 pillars here. So as the name suggests, so we will focus on net zero, which will include reducing emissions across the whole IKEA value chain. There will be a neutralization, as Henrik also alluded to in the case of H&M. So we also have a vision on how to neutralize the 10% residual emissions across the value chain. And then we have decided that we will do, it's not only enough that we work on net zero and aligning our business with the science of net zero, but it's really important to take a system-wide approach and to contribute to wider reductions in society and also wider carbon removals in society to really contribute to the system-wide challenge that we are sitting with. So if we go to the next slide, just to give you a perspective of the IKEA value chain. So this was the footprint as per our FY24 reporting, which we put out in January this year. So there is quite a lot of parallel to what Henrik mentioned in the case of H&M. In the case of IKEA as well, 2/3 of the emissions sit upstream. Just in our case, so we term material emissions as the emissions happening from cradle till the gate of tier 1 supplier. So all the upstream emissions connected to material extraction. IKEA is also a big restaurant brand, counterintuitive as it might sound. We are among the top 10 restaurant chains. So food is a big part of our agenda. Even if it is 4%, it's a very important agenda for us to work on. Production is what we term the emissions at our tier 1 suppliers. So mainly in the form of electricity or heating, refrigerants, so cooling. So these are main ways in which these 7% emissions happen. And then it's also about how we transport our goods to our DCs. We also have franchisees around the world who run the stores on our behalf. So there's also emissions related to running the stores. There is emission related to shipping goods to our customers in terms of making home deliveries. And there's also a lot of emissions from the use of our products. Again, not the first thing that might come to mind thinking about IKEA, but we also sell a lot of electronic products dishwasher, microwaves, ovens, light bulbs, and all of them, they require energy to run. So that's a significant part of our footprint as well. And then there is an end of life emissions. So 2/3 of our emissions sit upstream, and then 1/3 of the emissions sit downstream. So in a sense, this is just laying, and the whole Beyond Net Zero framework gives us a good way to think about bringing together all these disconnected pieces into one aligned picture and under one umbrella. So this is how we sort of work on pillar number one, which is on how do we account for it and how do we disclose our inventory aligned with the latest science on an annual basis. And then if we go to the next slide, in terms of setting 1.5 aligned targets, we've sort of set commitments for ourselves aligned with the science of 1.5. So we have committed to getting to 50% reduction by 2030 compared to our FY16 baseline. And we are committed to getting to 90% reduction by FY50. And then the last 10% will be neutralized using carbon removal and storage within our value chain. And we have been making steady progress. We've gotten to 28% reduction, but also very cognizant that we have also harvested a lot of low-hanging fruits within our business. And now, even if there is 22% remaining over the next 5 years, it's an uphill journey for us. And we don't, there are some parts where we have all the answers. And then there are some parts where our business continues to work super hard to find the answers and how we get to the 50% goal that we have set for ourselves. And then if we go to the next slide, in terms of reducing, and we always take a value chain point of view, and then we have identified for us 4 key drivers which will help us in reducing emissions. So materials and food, as you would, if you recognize the numbers from 2 slides ago, 56% of our emissions is just from materials and food. So we need to steer towards using more recycled material, renewable materials. So there's a lot of focus, and also using materials with a lower climate footprint. So there's a lot of focus on that right now. Transitioning towards a circular business will definitely help. And there's also a big push towards renewable energy, electrification, energy efficiency. And this is not only at our supplier factories, this is also related to transportation, and this is also related to upstream processes as such. So if we also have more renewable energy upstream, our material emissions will also come down. And then alluding to the 7th point of the Beyond Net Zero framework, which is enable and inspire customers. So this is also an opportunity for us to, we will also be able to lower our emission by inspiring customers, by purchasing lower emission products. It could be through nudging customers to buy more energy efficient appliances, for example, just one example, or trying out a little bit of plant-based food rather than the meat option. So we're not asking customers to completely go off meat, but encouraging them to have a bit more plant-based diet in their food. But also very important for us is that not only trying to maximize for climate benefits, but having an integrated approach that we take a balanced view. So what helps climate should also not put nature loss or air pollution or deteriorate the human rights picture as such. It should only improve, and we need to find that balance in all the pathways that we find. And then if we go further, this is what we have envisaged for us as our climate roadmap, as we call them, in terms of what needs to happen between now and 2030. So there are a series of actions which each part of the value chain have committed to. And as I said, a number of these actions have some gaps, which the team continue to work hard to bridge the gaps. And a lot of it is also related to policy, but there's also a lot of dependencies in terms of the investments that we make along with our stakeholders across the whole value chain. So this is also in terms of disclosing transparently in terms of how we will reach our commitment, and not only committing to a number, not only as a tick in the box as such. And then if we go to the next slide, so this was about the 90% reduction, and then the 10% residual emissions. So we have already embarked on some projects connected to forests and forestry. At IKEA, wood is one of the main commodities. And then we have an opportunity to work in our forest landscapes. And in this case, we are very fortunate to work with the WWF team in many of the landscapes around the world on forestry projects, but also related to agriculture, whether it is regenerative agriculture, and also for us defining what regenerative agriculture really is, because there's also And we continue defining that for ourselves at IKEA, but then also looking at agroforestry projects and how that impacts a lot of commodities, including cotton, for example. So at this point of time, we are putting in money, but we are still trying to figure out how do we, there's still a lot of unknowns in terms of how do we do the MRV, measure, report, verify, what tools do we need, but at least we have gotten started. Because we believe these pilots will give us a lot of learnings, which we can then scale to many other projects. And then we are also working on extending the lifetime of the product, because the longer that we can put our products in existence, the longer carbon can be stored within them. It's on a temporary basis, but we can extend the temporary storage of carbon. So that's also an agenda that we keep working on. But these projects are not only limited to the value chain. And if we go to the next slide, and that will be my last slide. So we also see that we have a bigger opportunity to go beyond net zero and not only limit to our value chain. So for example, when we engage with suppliers, in many cases, we might only have 5%, 10% of share with our suppliers. But when we go with our agenda, we don't only say, okay, supplier, partner, can you please phase out coal just for the IKEA portion? So it's always a full supplier point of view. And of course, we will account for the IKEA portion in our net zero goals. But then the portion which we are able to inspire our suppliers to decarbonize, that's beyond net zero bookkeeping, so as to say. And same with removals as well, as in we will start with the 10% neutralization, but that will not be the end. We will also neutralize beyond the 10% number, and we will also go beyond the value chain as well in terms of, we will start with nature-based solutions. That's what we have committed to. And today we are also doing quite a lot in terms of biofuels, for example. Wherever there is no physical connectivity, we are actually publishing those numbers as beyond IKEA. And now, of course, the SBTi is revising its new standards, so we wait to see what that means for us. So there are examples in how we are sort of moving beyond the value chain. And then we are also investing in companies which can be climate solutions, not only for IKEA, but also for the world at large. Of course, it starts with a capitalist outlook that, what we are investing in should provide benefits to us at IKEA. For example, last year we invested in a couple of companies called New School Foods, which is into seaweed. They are into plant-based salmon. Very intriguing as it might seem. We see that there's an opportunity to introduce that in our restaurant, but then not only limited to IKEA restaurant. It should be a climate solution at scale. And Nordic Sea Farm is a company which is into sustainable seaweed. So we are also trying to figure out what does that mean? Can we use more seaweed within our materials as such? And then partnerships is the last, which is again very, very, very linked to the Beyond Net Zero framework, which is point number 5 on policy. So this is very, very important because, our transition plan can only be as good. We can only influence it to an extent. We are also dependent on systems as such. And there we work with a lot of like-minded partners with WWF in many of the landscapes, like Vietnam, for example, where we are having a project right now. Along with H&M as well. And then we've also had the privilege to partner with H&M also in countries like Bangladesh, for example, to advocate for policies which can help in speedier renewable energy scale out, but not limited to Asia. But we also do now with the NDC 3.0, we are also engaging a lot with policymakers in terms of what are our needs in terms of climate, nature, circular. All of these are so interconnected. So we are putting together these basket of asks to our two countries and framing this as an economic opportunity and not like a very good thing to do. It's not only a saving the planet thing, it is, but also for them, it's a GDP opportunity for countries. And that's a big focus for us right now. So I actually stopped with there. And what you can see is that we are hugely thankful to WWF as such for this framework. And this is, what we have been able to, and this is again, we keep iterating our strategy. But a lot of what you see here is thanks to the work together with WWF and H&M through the work on Beyond Net Zero. So I stop there, Sean. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for a very detailed and excellent talk. And thank you so much for those kind words as well. That's exactly what we love to hear. So I'll move us to the questions and answers section. And we have a lot of great questions coming in. So I'm going to spotlight our speakers so we can see us all together. And I'll start us off. This has been wonderful. So thank you so much, everybody, for your questions already. I will start with Lucy's question. She's hearing a lot of companies struggling to operationalize their net zero ambitions. So moving from planning phase to implementation phase. Do you have any advice on where to focus or what factors help engage the wider businesses around the action and effort needed to reach net zero? So it's a big question, and I'm going to offer it to both of you because I'd actually love to hear both perspectives. So who's brave enough to go first?
Yes, I can do my best to try. I think maybe unsatisfactory answer from me, but I think it's a continuous journey. It's not kind of a step you take, but you kind of, yeah, it's continuous journey. I think for us having a very clear commitment, a science-based target that is kind of non-negotiable and not set within the frames of our company has really helped. Then we can hang everything, so to speak, on that. And then really having the responsibility in the end integrated into the function who's working with it, that reducing the emissions connected to transports is part of the kind of logistics workflow while being supported by the sustainability team and not the other way around. But that is not kind of where you start the journey. It's a long journey, I think, and it has been for us to get to that point. So start the journey is maybe the unsatisfactory answer there then.
Thank you. And Sri, have you got anything to add
I,
on there?
I resonate a lot with what Henrik mentioned. In our case, for example, when we went to the management, to the board with our net zero commitments, the first year they rejected it. And they said that, on what basis are we actually making the 50% commitment? What forms the basis? So we had to actually go back to the business, and then we had to see, okay, each part of the business, we actually went and turned all stones. So in a sense, we already operationalized and instituted the responsibility in those parts of the value chain that, okay, if you were to sort of work with this goal, what are you going to do? What initiatives do you see as easy to get? Or I should never use easy to get, relatively easy to get. What are very difficult, what is it that we don't have answers to, and to really put this transparently. And then it bottoms up, resulted in this SBTI plan to the board. Then we said that, okay, this is what we are having a high confidence on. And then we already had a sign off from each part of the value chain that they stand behind the numbers. So then it was more in terms of how do we bring in this whole targets within the balanced scorecard, so that it's not only a good thing. So every year there is a cycle where each of the functional units, they need to go up to the management and explain their performance, quality, logistics, price, but also in terms of their emissions. And there is always a question in terms of, if there is a good progress, great. What is it that others can learn? If there is not much progress, how can we help as IKEA? Depending on the part of the value chain. It could be in the form of financing, it could be in the form of competence, it could take different forms. But being very action-oriented, getting started, as Henrik mentioned, is really important, but also being very action-oriented and also always having this partnership spirit. It's not only cascading goals, but always working with stakeholders across the value chain that, we have the responsibility, but it's also, how do we work together to find the right solutions? To keep costs low and to make solutions available to our customers.
Perfect. Thank you both. Now we have some lovely targeted questions coming in as well. So to Henrik, what will your next steps in reducing Scope 3 be? What topics are you most hopeful about, apart from renewable energy, of course?
I'm not allowed to say renewable energy, well, then it's tricky. I mean, that will always be a cornerstone. But I think kind of upgrading a lot of the processes. A lot of the processes are thermal processes in the supply chain. So, basically boiling water using fuels like natural gas and electrifying that kind of process. So either updating to a more modern process driven by electricity or removing the need to burn fuels to generate the steam needed. I think that is definitely a future kind of step we need to take. And then, of course, that needs to be combined with renewable energy or renewable electricity. But I think that's one area. I think our circular business models is also one area that is growing. The resell, where we mainly have right now, we have what's called Selpi, so a separate kind of entity that is operating as a resell. And I think that's also one of the levers that will come down the line, so to speak, and deliver. Yeah, so that's if you try to look in the crystal ball, what will come.
Excellent. And we've got lots of questions for both of you, so I'll scroll down and get something for Sriram. This one here, for materials, what is the emissions mostly? Deforestation for timber, energy use, inputs, agriculture, cotton. And where do you see what you can do to reduce the best, basically?
Sure. Almost 35% of our emissions in materials is related to wood and paper. Close to 20% is from metals, and within metals, it's mainly carbon steel, which is the biggest. And then we have stainless steel and aluminum. Textiles is also close to 20%. Cotton is the biggest commodity contributing to textile emissions. And then we also have comfort seat. We also have polyols, and we have plastics, which is close to 15%. PET, PP, and then we have a lot of other industrial grade plastics as well. So broadly, these are our broad buckets. And I'm sorry, Sean, can you repeat the latter part of your question?
Apologies, I've already lost it. Well, it's okay. That's, I think, very helpful at first. And because we've got a lot of very targeted questions, I'm going to start jumping right into these. And back to Henrik. What approach have you followed to retrieve the energy-related data for Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers? What suggestions would you have for a company that is starting its supplier engagement roadmap?
We collect monthly energy data from Tier 1, Tier 2, and almost all Tier 3 suppliers now. And we kind of cascade that collection process. So we have the same tool, but we ask each tier suppliers to point us in the direction of the ones that they have, so to speak. So we continuously build that traceability. And 100% is always an almost impossible number, but we have a very high degree now of the traceability on actual suppliers. And I think when it comes to the share of energy, there is a fairly straightforward. Once you start to collect this information and you use kind of estimates to fill out what you don't have, it's quite clear where you need to focus your traceability initiatives. So I would say that if you're in the start of the journey, first understand like what tier is the kind of big consumer. In our industry, it's the second tier is a really big thermal energy consumer, and the third tier is a big electricity consumer. And then identify the big units or the big kind of flows you have, and then focus on that traceability first, I would say, rather than trying to get to 100% in the first layer before moving on, so to speak.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. I'm conscious of the time and we have so many questions, so I'm going to prioritize a couple here, but we have some really lovely ones coming in. So, are there any companies using climate financing tools such as internal carbon prices to align investments, business with the sustainability strategies? And that's a question I'll ask both of you, actually.
Yeah, we do have a carbon price, an internal carbon price. It's what's called a shadow price. So there is no kind of financial transaction occurring, but basically and it covers, for us, it covers the large emission sources. So it covers the materials and the production of those, kind of the fibers, and the production of those into a finished garment and the transport. So any emitting source in that will have an additional cost in the kind of P&L for the product that comes from the carbon pricing. But that is not kind of, again, a financial transaction, but it's a decision-making tool. So it steers the decisions in terms of P&L on this then.
Perfect. Sriram?
At IKEA, we are not working with the carbon pricing today. We are more working with the carbon budget, which we have sort of allocated to different units as such. But it's something that we are looking into right now in terms of the feasibility. Data has been a bit of a constraint in setting shadow price, as Henrik mentioned. We are onto that right now, but we don't have that today.
Of course. Okay, and our next question, I like this one. Many companies complain of the high costs of transition. Are there any data from your journeys that show either H&M or IKEA's approach is financially beneficial from a cost-benefit perspective?
You go ahead and start this time. I feel like I start every time.
Sure. I think for us, keeping costs low or not increasing the cost is always the starting point. So in a sense, what we always need to work with is a portfolio approach. There will be some cost increases. Then there's always an efficiency or really looking at, where can we drive out costs? For example, if it is a supplier moving towards electrification, as in there will be higher costs, but then can we sort of invest in the supplier to make some energy efficiency program, especially at the supplier who are sort of very early. In most cases, we have sort of saturated the energy efficiency possibilities, but wherever possible, can we sort of help in, are there any low-hanging fruits that we can tap into? We have also sort of looked into relooking into the design of materials as such, or choice of materials as well. For example, why do we need this particular material for this particular product? Can we actually use material B, which is maybe, and can we be more material efficient? Can we change the production techniques so that we are using less of the material instead of using more material? Can we use a different material? Are we using the right material for the right application? So all of these inquiry has also helped in many cases move to a different material, which is lower cost, which is also music to the ears of our teams, and also we are able to provide that to our customers as well. So it's not, in many cases, it's not directly applied. In some cases, it's like indirectly we need to see how do we manage costs. We take costs somewhere, but we drive out costs somewhere else, and then overall we get to where we want to get to.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds quite similar to our reasoning as well. Maybe to add, I think we try to summarize like what's the spend on this, and we publish that so you can read the report what the spend is. And now with the new legislation coming, we will need to break that down even further. So I think that's great that we're able to show like what does this kind of thing cost. But it's obviously not a one-to-one exercise. Parts of this is part of the customer offering as well, that this is made from recycled material, for example. That can be part of the customer offering, I think. And another perspective that we see when you think about this is not like you cannot balance them out and see, you get plus and minus and they balance out, but it's rather that you mitigate a risk. So you do this risk analysis, the TCFD, for example, and you say, we have a big risk if there is a carbon tariff or a carbon tax at some point in a production country. If we can already now make sure we reduce emissions and electrify those processes, we are future-proofing. But of course, you cannot, it's not something you can count on here now, but it's a risk mitigation. So that's also a financial kind of way of, I think, handling that question.
I think it's an excellent way to end our session. I realize the time, it's now 58 minutes past, so we're very close to the hour. So I just want to say again, thank you so much to our very special guests for joining us and for talking us through their work. It's so great to be able to talk about this at practical level. We really love that. So thank you to Henrik Sundberg, Climate Impact Lead for H&M Group. Thank you to Sriram Rajagopal, Head of Climate and Air Quality at Inter-IKEA Group. And thank you all for taking the time to listen to us today. Please go and download the Beyond Net Zero report.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.